Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Biz here from The Casual Athlete. Today I'm going to go through in detail about the Sharks versus Bulldogs preseason week 2 game. I know there's a lot of interest around the Dogs this year after a poor year last year. A lot of new recruits, a lot of potential fantasy buys. I'm going to go through the game, my thoughts, and obviously the fantasy implications across 80 minutes last night. Now, the first thing I'll notice is to start the game, the Canterbury defense came out strong and bruising. They looked good. They looked tight defensively. And that kind of intensity wore off. But what was good to see is guys like Salmon were busy in the middle. Now, in terms of Salmon, what kind of role was he playing? Well, there was times when he was at first receiver, second receiver. He was that ball-playing lock that we talked about last week. Now, does that spell trouble for Curran? Yes and no. Now, the interesting thing about the Salmon and Curran dynamic is Curran came on at about the 15th minute, but Salmon stayed on the field at lock. So where did Curran play? Curran actually played in the prop rotation. Now, look, I know these days locks and props, they kind of play the same way, but the telling factor was after the first try that Curran actually took the hit up off the kickoff, which is usually your props job. Now, Curran only played about 25 minutes. Like I said, he came on at the 15-minute mark and he went off at halftime. He didn't come back on. But he managed to score a very respectable 30 points in about 25 minutes. Now, yes, he was boosted by the fact that it was a pretty clunky game. So there was a lot of defense in the middle, not much ball going left and right. And the prop factor meant that in not much time, he had racked up 100 meters. And of course, he had a very nice try assist to Jacob Preston. Just a quick ball, sleight of hand, and Preston went over pretty much untouched. So Curran a bit of ball playing as well. So even though he kind of played prop, I feel like Salmon and Curran both had a bit of a lock prop type of role. So Curran, 25 minutes, 30 points. It's an interesting one that if he comes on at the 15th, 20th minute during games and plays out the rest, then at 60 minutes, he's still a buy. But it's actually really hard to know what his minutes will be. Now, in terms of his starting lock, Salmon, he played about 50 minutes for 39 points. Now, he played about 25 straight, and he came back on the second half for about 25 more. It's interesting to note, though, in the second half, he kind of roamed around a bit. Once Burden and Hutchison came off, he kind of roamed at edge, he roamed at lock, he roamed at 5'8". So the last 15 minutes is kind of all over the place. But it was a good score. He was busy in defense. He ran the ball decently. He looked like he was ball playing. So I think if he gets that 50-minute role, he could be a 35-point player. That's enough for me. He'll be dual position at 20K. Get him in your team if he's lock round one. But it looks like they like him a lot. So that's kind of the lock and bench dynamics. In terms of the halves, now, what can I say? Drew Hutchison didn't have a great game. He was actually quite poor. There was a lot of hospital passes. He got Taff and Preston absolute poleaxed through hospital balls. He made this really clean line break, but his finishing touches were terrible. He couldn't finish it, but it was a very nice line break, a good shape, good shape going left, and he just kind of clean broke through. It wasn't a very impressive performance. But in saying all that, he played 65 minutes with Burden, and they both came off at the same time when Toby Sexton came on. By the way, Toby Sexton got like a sleeve tattoo and things going. He looks like a bad boy right now. So, maybe good fantasy points coming if he manages to get that starting role. But just based on the fact that Hutch started the game pretty poorly and he still played 65 minutes and they only gave Sexton 15 minutes, it looks pretty clear that Hutch is their guy. It's annoying, but I think for fantasy purposes, he's actually pretty solid. Like, yes, I know he only had 30 points in 65 minutes, but 100 meters, he tackles like 25, 30 times a game. Like, there's opportunities for offloads, tackle breaks. Like, he could be a 40 guy and his price is about 30. So that's the story about Hutch and, the halves dynamics there. In terms of my first note, Blake Wilson. Now, he was bloody impressive. He has, if you look at his scores from last year, he goes 60-10, 60-10. This was one of those really good games. He was dangerous in every run. He made a couple of errors to start, but they were overturned with captain's challenges. He was probably one of the best on field, definitely the best back. Like, if I look at the other backs, like going to, Taff and Jerry and things like that, they didn't play that well. I mean, Taff had a particularly bad game in the second half. Like, he started pretty decently, but in the middle or first part of the second half there, he made like 3 or 4 errors on the trot, and he had lost his confidence. He played about 70 minutes, and he came up with 13 fantasy points. Look, guys, like with Blake Taff, he's cheap, but he was a stacked Souths team, and he barely averaged 20, 25 points. Like, you can't expect much more at the Dogs. He's just not a fantasy guy. He might pass the eye test in terms of he looks squirmy, he looks like he can break a tackle or two, but just the work rate isn't there to be a fantasy fullback. So 13 points, 70 minutes. Talked about Cohen, talked about Hutchison. Hughes, now Sam Hughes came on in about 25 minutes. He played 15 odd minutes because he actually had a bit of a head clash with one of their players about, close towards the back end of the first half. And I think he played on for the first half, but he didn't come back on in the second half. And it's probably just precautionary. I think if he's playing the back end 15 minutes and he's playing 15, 20 minutes in the second half, 30, 35 minutes, he's got a career PPM in limited time of 1. And I know in the reserve grades in the juniors, he'll also be a bit of a workaholic. So he's definitely a guy, if he's on the bench, I'm going to have. I know he came off the bench last year for 15, 20 minutes, but this is different. They've lost a lot of guys in the middle, and he looks really good. And like Poasa, who started in the prop rotation today, he kind of came on after 15 minutes for Josh Curran, like I said. I guess the only threat is if Curran's playing that prop role, there might be less minutes. But I think with a guy like Hughes, he only needs 30 minutes to be relevant, especially at base price. We talked about Taff. In terms of the Sharkies, look, not many surprises there. I know McInnes had a big score, but when Finucane comes back, it's not too much going. Trindle, he started the game a bit slow. Like, his kicking game was a bit shoddy, but second half he really dominated, played really well. I think, look, he had the only thing I'm really worried about from Trindle looked a bit of a sharpshooter with the boot, so I'm hoping Hines won't lose his goal kicking at any time. But Trindle looks like the guy, and I think Hines won't score as well as he did, but just because Trindle's a much more dominant player than Moylan. But I think Hines will be pretty solid having a guy like Trindle, especially if Hines is kind of playing a second, third receiver role, because you know how dynamic he can be at fullback as well. So, look, in terms of the Sharkies, I don't think there's anything of note. I think Wilton had a good game, but there's not really too many Sharkies who are fantasy relevant this year other than Hines or, if you're taking a pod like Ramian or Talagai. But I don't think they're going to give minutes to Iro and those sort of guys this year, at least to start the season, unless there's an injury or suspension. So I guess recapping the minutes for the Dogs players, because I know that's where everyone's interest is. Taff 70 minutes. Crichton, look, actually, I didn't really talk about Critter. He played really hard for 20 minutes, 0 fantasy points, but that's how it is sometimes. He came on, he put a couple of good shots on. He looked hungry to ruck it up. He was really on the sidelines, hyping up all his players, even after he came on, really trying to take on that leadership role. So that was good to see. Hutchison and Burden, like I said, they played 65 minutes together and they both went off at the same time. So that kind of looks like a locked and loaded round one halves pairing. Burden, mixed game. He kind of looked like the same as last year. He drifted in and out, wasn't that dominant. Hutch didn't do too much kicking, but enough to be niggly. But I think, I'll have Hutch in my team if he gets that starting spot, just because he runs it so much and he tackles a lot. But look, Hutchison doesn't look like an exciting player. I'm sorry to say that. He's solid, but Sexton is the guy. I think, I don't know how long they'll run Hutch for, but I don't think Sexton's going to be kept out too long. Salmon, 50 minutes. We talked about him in a bit of detail. Hughes, we talked about 15 minutes. Again, like 20 points in 15 minutes, 30 minutes is enough for him. Curran, really good stint in 25 minutes of the prop rotation. And then Reed, some people were interested in Reed. Like, is this with the Bulldogs improving? Can he get back to his Parramatta scores? Look, he played 60 minutes and he scored about 29 points. So I think, again, on track for 40, 45 points. I don't think he's a tier 1 gun anymore. I think the difference between playing at the Dogs and the style the Eels had, where they were running it up with Junior Paulo and Ring Campbell-Gillard, like, it's just a different style. Like, the Dogs have a really threatening left edge, kick out, Crichton and Josh Adokar, but their props are, just workers, right? Like Max King and Sam, like, they're not your big tackle busting, try scoring type. So a bit less there for Reed. But I guess that's the key takeaways. I'm going to try and cover as many of these preseason games as I can. It's difficult because I'm in New York and a lot of these are at 1 a.m., 3 a.m. Like, this game was at 4 a.m. or something, but I watched the replay in the morning. But I know how important it is to get good fantasy coverage on preseason trials, because a lot of people don't have time to watch them or just aren't that interested, but there's obviously very key fantasy implications. So to summarize, I think who's on the way up. I think, Salmon looks good. I think Sam Hughes looks good. I think Hutchison is firming. Curran, look, I don't know about him. He had really high work rate playing at prop, but I don't know what his minutes looks like. At a mid-range price, I think I'll probably be skipping him. And then I think in terms of, Taff, Reed, we didn't talk about Bronson necessarily that much, but he was okay, but nothing real standout. He almost scored a try when Niokora held him down, and he got sin-bin for it. But other than that, he had a pretty quiet game. But yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through my notes here. Is there anything I've missed? Palasa, again, didn't play huge minutes, even though he's starting prop. I don't think he's fantasy relevant. Eli Clark played really well at center once Crichton went off, but he's obviously not going to make the first grade team. And Kurt Mann came on after 30 minutes and he played out the game. Look, I don't think he's going to get 50 minutes in real games, but he looked like Kurt Mann. The blonde tips looked different. He looked different, but he played the same style. But yeah, that's it from me, guys. Stay tuned over the weekend for as much coverage as me and Longy and Miles can potentially give you. We love our footy. It's back. And, 1 week to go till Vegas. How good. I wish I could get out there from New York, but none of my friends want to go. None of my friends are really leagueies. So I might have to watch from here. But if anyone's watching this from the US and wants to link up and go to Vegas and watch the game, hit me up or comment below. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.